Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com.
That these kids don't know we put up with.
Totally. Now everyone's got their own phone. I'm like texting my kids, like, it's dinner time.
Oh my gosh, I know. So daunting.
Welcome everyone to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast. I'm Carolyn Woodard, your host, and today I'm really excited to be talking with Jennifer Huftalen. You want to introduce yourself and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Carolyn. I'm Jenny or Jennifer Huftalen. I'm the Director of Client Services at Community IT. And I've been with the organization for 17 years, which is remarkable. I spent my time here largely focusing on the client experience and having a lot of conversations with the organizations we support and with potential organizations, so new potential clients as well. So happy to be here today.
Thanks for joining me. What I was really interested to bring you on the podcast was to just kind of talk about this moment that we're in, and the nonprofit sector is experiencing some really difficult challenges and political challenges, kind of the funding challenges, the environment. A lot of nonprofits that were never controversial before and are suddenly finding themselves, under attack or doing something that is suddenly seen as controversial. So they have to respond to that. So there's a lot of like programmatic and, press releases and coalition building and a lot of things that you could think that kind of everybody's hair is on fire all the time. Mm-hmm. And I know that you are interacting with our clients. We have hundreds of clients. So I just wondered, kind of as some reality setting, could you talk a little bit about the challenges that our clients are talking with you about and how that impacts their IT use and their IT support?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, I think the primary kind of emotion that most folks were supporting and, potential clients that we've been speaking to is just stress. I think there's just a lot of anxiety, and for good reason. I mean, I think just on a macro level, there's a lot of stress in the news, even if it's not feeling directly, targeted to either the work that you do. It feels targeted toward things you maybe care about. And so, in some ways it feels similar to, almost kind of the way the beginning of the pandemic felt, where there was just a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty just makes people feel anxious. And, so I think in terms of, what we are saying kind of in response to that, I would say that, for the organizations that we're currently supporting, I think their primary issue right now is a worry about funding. That's kind of the main thing, and not necessarily direct impact from federal changes, but just, again, on a macro level, that the economy is up and down, and that impacts everybody eventually. And so when you kind of don't know what's going to happen, you tend to hold tight and not want to make any significant changes. For the folks that we're supporting currently, I think that's kind of the main thing that's come up is just, hey, look, can you be flexible, because we don't know what's coming, and we don't know if next year our budget's going to be the same. And so we've always been in a position to kind of meet the organizations we're supporting where they're at, and be flexible and kind of ride that wave with them. And we've done that for decades, with the organizations that we're working with. So that's the very kind of practical, obvious one that folks are thinking about and worried about. I think as far as the other piece you mentioned, on a fundamental level, people feeling like they're under attack, which is, again, a really scary feeling. And, when you kind of don't know what that's going to result in, you don't know where to start, to think about what systems we should be worrying about. What do we do? Where do we start? Because again, we don't really know what the threat is. It just feels like something's coming for them, because of the work they do, right, and the people they serve. And I'm hearing more of that type of concern from organizations we're not yet supporting. So we're hearing from new organizations that maybe their current provider isn't talking to them about it, or feel unsatisfied maybe with the way they're talking about it. A lot of cases, organizations that have maybe the need has been very well met on a basic level, computer support, but they're not kind of hearing that they feel this anxiety about maybe how their mission is again in the news, or being targeted in a way that's feeling different. So there's that, or organizations that at this point are feeling like, geez, now's the time. Like, we haven't done anything yet, and we've just been sort of in operation mode, not worrying, moving forward. But this stuff is making us feel nervous about not having anything in place for basic security. And again, we don't know where to start. It kind of, I was thinking about it this week actually, because it feels very similar, I think, to when you like haven't been to the doctor in a long time, and you've sort of been ignoring it. And like, that little ache and pain is like there, but it's not, a major crisis, but you've gone a while now. And all of a sudden you're like, I should probably have somebody take a look. And that's just an anxiety, right? And so, I think what I have found in those conversations I've been having is that just starting a conversation with an IT company, or starting to read a little bit online, or starting to just literally take that first step, I think can do a lot to kind of assuage some of the real concerns. Because the reality is, we're not seeing, for the organizations we support, we're not seeing significant threats that are all that different than they were before all of this uncertainty started, earlier in the year. There are still bad actors, there's still criminals out there that are going to be, coming for everybody, but it's not necessarily fundamentally different than it's always been. So our recommendations are the same, right? We'll and again, I'm not the expert on that, but I think kind of the basics haven't changed, which is, you want to be thoughtful about your accounts. That's kind of the number one place where we see compromise. Keep those secure, have MFA applied, especially to those critical systems. Get some sort of security awareness training for your staff, have them be thoughtful, because at the end of the day, people clicking on things is the last sort of area of defense. So you want your folks to be thinking about what they click before they click. And then having backups, having some place where your data is securely backed up outside of the primary systems, so that in the event there is a compromise, there's a place to go to get that information back. So those are the same recommendations we've had, for many years now, and that continues. And then, of course, we always say, we should dig in on maybe more of their specific issues if they're having, targeted experience. But for us so far, thankfully, that hasn't changed significantly in the last few months.
Well, and I will say we have a lot of free resources on our website dealing with a lot of these different areas. We have a free downloadable cybersecurity playbook that sort of lays out the fundamentals and basics. And something that we always talk about is that a lot of vendors and a lot of maybe some other MSPs also are going to try and make you feel afraid. And the more afraid you are, the more you're likely to be willing to spend on some comprehensive testing or some big cybersecurity package. And what we found and what we advise is that a lot of the stuff you can do doesn't have to be expensive, but you have to do it. You have to have a plan, and you have to spend time. You have to, maybe that's where the expense is, in finding executive time and staff time to prioritize training, building a response plan, doing your cybersecurity IT roadmap, so like what you're implementing, and that especially now, I think data also is kind of, it's not
Hmm.
new, but it's a new thing that you may have data in lots of different systems. You may have data on clients like in a Google sheet. So
Right.
doing an MFA on that, if those clients might be vulnerable or you might be vulnerable. So, but that isn't expensive. It just is, it's expensive in terms of time, your time and priorities.
That's right. Yeah. Again, it comes back, I think, to that first step piece where that's always the biggest hurdle. And a lot of times people feel like just the anxiety around it prevents them from taking that first step. And again, I think to your point of, there's a lot out there, there's a lot of fear in response to it. And that is something that, we feel kind of strongly that if your partner is not explaining it in a way that's making sense to you, you should not have to be, an IT professional and understand all the lingo to understand kind of what they're saying and where it applies to your operations. So if they're not able to break it down to you in simple terms, keep asking the questions, keep trying to figure out where it fits. And that's their job. They should be able to do that. And yeah, I'd be very wary about just kind of throwing everything at the problem because, uh, there's first of all, not every solution is necessarily appropriate, and change is already very hard. And if your staff are going through a change to maybe a new provider and then a whole bunch of new things that they now have to do, they might not do it, and you have to have that buy-in from staff to really fundamentally understand why. And it's important that it's sensible to them too, and not just kind of another thing that they start to maybe ignore. So yeah, I think it's really important to have that relationship. And again, that's why we take that approach of kind of developing an understanding of the organization, kind of what they're facing, and making sure they understand what we are recommending and why, and that they have the tools to communicate it, to their staff as well.
Yeah, no, that I've heard that from clients and people in our webinars and people on our team as well, that we really have an attitude that none of the cybersecurity stuff is stuff that you can't do. Like
Right.
you can do it. It takes, willpower and priorities and leadership and following through, but it's not something that only an outside company can do for you.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you can definitely do little things too, and start again. I think in pieces, bite off a little bit of what you can manage, and again, a good partner should be able to tell you where to start. What the most important problems may be, and then work your way toward developing a more comprehensive approach. But yeah, again, I think just understanding the basics, getting a feel for some of the language, and making sure that you're clear on what's being recommended and where the value add is specifically to your organization is really important.
And revisiting it, which I know is something that can be hard also for nonprofits with so many priorities. And like we said, so many fires that they're trying to put out all
Hmm.
at the same time. But cybersecurity, your IT policies, your, IT basics, they aren't something that you can just set and forget. So if you haven't looked at your policies or looked at your policy for your response to a crisis or a hack or a suspected compromise in a couple of years, like that's too long. You need to
Hmm.
be able to sit down at least annually and go back over everything and make sure it's still relevant and that your staff still know what they're supposed to do, who they're supposed to tell if they see something suspicious or they clicked on the wrong thing.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think it's always evolving. And again, it's similar back to the doctor thing, right? You may be taking certain vitamins now and it's great, but that you're changing, and
Yeah.
the environment you're in is changing. And so you got to get back and do an evaluation and make sure that you make the right tweaks, because that's exactly right. And what we found too is that a lot of the drivers for the requirements that are now coming down from funders or from other kind of oversight boards for the organizations we support are, cybersecurity requirements and cybersecurity insurance, requirements, and other regulatory things that are new. And so that is a time to make sure that, you're checking all those boxes. And, we're finding that a lot of the specific little bells and whistles that we're being asked about now are really the result of that the compliance needs are changing. And so that's a really good time to also take a pause, look at what you're doing, and make sure that, your provider is handling all of those things for you. Digital security is like you mentioned, like names and email addresses and that kind of thing are things we're hearing more about. I think there are people who feel like when their mission is targeted, then the person gets doxxed or whatever.
Yeah.
That's kind of a new thing.
Well, I can answer that question
Oh,
because
good.
we have an article and a podcast that we did a couple of months ago about doxing particularly and about
Oh,
protecting the personal information of your staff members. And we have a couple of companies and services that we feel comfortable making referrals along a range of different price points. So if you have staff members who are online a lot and you want to protect their identities, there are some low cost services that you can sign up for that help keep an eye on where they're appearing online and maybe their home address and who's in their family, those sorts of things, all the way up to more bespoke. If you have an executive director who's getting actual threats,
mm.
what kind of security you might want to have for them and how you can help their information of their address like disappear online.
Oh,
And
cool.
that takes several months to have happen and it's much more expensive. But if you're
Yeah.
facing that kind of a situation, it's good to have those kind of resources. So we can point people to that on our website. We did this podcast with Shauna Dillavue about online security and doxing. And I said, well, is the answer just not to be online? And she was like, how would that even be possible? That's not a
Exactly.
possibility in our world
Nope.
today. And also, it does feel like giving in,
I
um,
know.
just admitting
I know.
that. But she said there are ways to hide your home address, your family, their addresses. It takes a while. So it does
Yeah.
take, it's probably not something that you can do yourself, but there are services out there that can help you with that
Okay.
and how and when to contact, the authorities and the police to report the threats and that sort of thing. So there
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
there are resources on that.
That's good.
So, do you have any advice before I let you go, in your experience with our clients and with prospective clients? It seems like one of the hardest things is carving out that time to meet with stakeholders. You put a committee together to revise your incident response plan. All of those sort of mundane, maybe boring, back
Hmm.
office types of things that you need to do to keep your IT going. And especially in a moment like this, where it feels like it's such a moment of crisis, it's really easy to feel that those political or environmental issues really require 100% of your attention. And sometime later down the road, you're going to go back and revise that incident response plan. So,
Hmm.
do you have any good ideas or suggestions for the people that you talk to of how to get leadership to, take an hour out of the next management meeting to talk about your cybersecurity, your data security, how you're keeping your IT systems safe in this moment?
Mm. Yeah, it is a tough one because it does take time, like you've said, and the mission is priority, right? And when the mission is currently taking up a lot of headspace and a lot of stress, you feel like that's just where your focus needs to be, which is understandable. And again, we don't want to come from a place of a fear response, but the reality is, if you're not being careful with your data and your systems, and you suffer a breach, that could cripple your mission, right? That could be it. So, it just is. It comes down to that fundamental truth of, there's no if there's no operations, if you have a very expensive breach and you lose a lot of data, your mission is going to suffer. So it's worth the time. Yeah, we hear a lot of times folks who will say things like they can't take the time to implement MFA because the executive's just too busy. And it's like, well, yeah, yes, I understand that, but account compromise continues to be the number one place where people suffer a breach, and your executive is the number one target. So just take take the half hour to set it up. Know that it's going to mean a couple of different clicks now moving forward, but that's going to protect you from a very potentially scary breach in the future. So it's sort of like going to the gym, like going to the doctor. It's not fun. Nobody likes it, but it's a lot more fun to do it that way than to do it the hard way, which could be really expensive, and ultimately, your mission could go away completely
Yeah.
if there's a significant cybersecurity breach.
Yeah, you end up in the hospital instead of just going.
That's exactly right. The ambulance ride is a lot more expensive than the annual appointment that you can schedule.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your insights with us today, because I know that you're just interacting with, hundreds of contacts at our clients and hearing from lots of different nonprofits in different areas about the challenges that they're facing and how they're managing their IT in response to that. And it's good to hear that. I mean, good. I don't know if it's good to hear it, but the fact that it's still most of what we're seeing are criminals. So it's not political, it's just money. Like they want you to wire the money to the wrong place. So all of these, but it's good that all of these protections that you can put in place, just basic cybersecurity protections, are going to protect you from criminals and from any political adversaries you have too. So it's worth it to put them in place.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Jenny. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Carolyn.
Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.